that when you're a better team, things happen differently for a better team. I've been trying to coach people on this for the Lions because we've seen it change. When it was the old Lions that with the same old Lions that people used to complain about, the 0-16 team that I was at the 16th loss in Lambeau on like December 23rd, nice crisp cold game, but that team. Every year it was you were focused on the draft. By mid-season, you were already looking at what the draft picks were going to be, what you were going to be able to get, who you were going to be able to poach off an opposing team's, the free agents, a practice squad guy that got cut for the 53-man roster. Now it's the opposite. Now they're on the other side. They lost both offensive coordinators, offensive and defensive. They lost a bunch of assistant coaches, and they're thinning out. But there's also some good things, which I try to tell people, which is, hey, there's guys that are re-signing probably at a lower amount because they want to be part of that team. They've established a culture, and I'm sure you've probably played in both. With bouncing around a little bit, you've probably had both situations where like, hey, this is a locker room situation, this is a team I really like, versus they're kind of more in a rebuild here.
Well, culture is a very funny thing. Some teams are able to establish it. Some teams are able to establish a good culture, and some teams are able to not have really any culture at all. I think one of the reasons they struggle in Cleveland is they have so much lack of continuity within their staff, within their players. I mean, you look how many quarterbacks they've brought in, look how many head coaches they've brought in. It's like no coach has really had a chance to truly implement what their core values are. And when you talk about a team with a culture, like what I think Dan's done such a good job with is his core values, and it's grit and it's being tough and together and everyone kind of being on the same bus and knowing what seat you're in and everyone rolling in the same direction. It's easy to say that, the little cliche statements and everyone's, core philosophy and all that. But when you actually can implement it, make it applicable to what they do day to day, the players want to hold themselves accountable to each other. The players want to trust each other. And I think sometimes when you just have a lot of good players, and yes, you might have a winning culture. I think winning culture is overrated. Successful culture is way better. And successful culture is more sustained. It endures. And winning cultures can be the programs that win every now and then you don't hear much from them. And then maybe they win every now and then. And sometimes that's talent driven. Sometimes the ball just bounces right. You get all the calls, whatever it may be. But when you're able to truly have a set of guys that would run through walls for each other and the coach, and those core values create a standard that no one wants to fall short on, it kind of creates that family bond. And when you think about like a tight family versus a non-tight family, that's the unconditional love that you have for each other, and you'll do whatever it takes. And I believe that when you have that positive mindset going along with everyone else locked arms with you in the same direction, it's that Sparta 300 type feeling that you can get.
That's an interesting distinction with the whole successful versus winning culture. I guess I've never thought about it that way, but I would think that in your mind, the Lions would fall under the successful culture, the more recent Dan Campbell version. Obviously, they had a lack of success for a long time that's been well documented and chronicled in especially this region. But they do seem to have that. Even the win last week kind of reeked of that to a degree, because I did think their backs were against the wall. I thought that was going to be a tough one. Dallas was kind of red hot. They had a lot of injuries for that game, and those were continuing to stock up. They don't always play great on a Thursday because you're off of your schedule, but they pulled through and they just they just dug down deep, and maybe that's playing, with your brothers versus with just a teammate, or, with somebody that's more of a father figure. I know you talked about that when you played for Frank Beamer, that was playing for a father figure is a little different than like, hey, this is just the economics of I'm a coach and I'm paid this much and I'm in charge, and it's a little different to disappoint that person, especially modern day with NIL and all of that kind of stuff, than it is a true father figure that recruited you since you were a young man, and has been an important part of your life and development. And you can even have that, I think, to a degree in the NFL. It's maybe not the same relationship, but there's still a difference in the relationships with the coaches, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And there's always going to be those coaches that just command so much respect, but also have a human side to them. One thing that I actually really liked about coaching with Mark D'Antonio is he had a very stoic nature about the look on his face. If you didn't know him, you would think he was just stone cold, no emotion. But behind closed doors, he was like one of the coolest, like, father figure, caring, loving people, but also like, don't screw up or I'm going to come down on you type thing. And I think that's something that in the NFL, I just remember I had a short stint in training camp with Seattle when Mike Holmgren was there, and his nickname was the Big Show. And they said he's just so much larger than life that when he walks into the room, everything goes silent and everyone just freezes. And there's a good part to that, and there's also a little bit of how is he when things are calm? How does he treat people? And honestly, he treated people better than you would have thought if you didn't know any better. And I think that's probably how Coach Saban is. He's the guy when he walks in the room, pin drop. But also, he's the same guy that could talk to his players and convince them that, hey, you've got to do right academically as much as you do this, that, and the other. And that's why he had a successful culture at Alabama and LSU and everywhere he's been. It's just so hard to do now because now authority is not respected in the same way because you're seeing pay grades. And when you see those pay grades where some players are making more than others and it just makes it hard. It blurs the line sometimes between, that respected father figure or the authoritarian military type leader. All of those lines get blurred now. So it's really hard for coaches to make that distinction.
I know a lot of fans that have been ardent college football fans over the years, more so than the NFL, because, well, I like that it's the passion of the game and these are younger kids and learning. That's kind of being taken out of the game to a degree with the whole NIL thing. And now that they do, I didn't even think of that, but like you're talking about, you have that, informal class system to a degree that sometimes exists on an NFL roster where it's, hey, if a guy, I remember reading, I think it was the news maybe out of the Raiders when they had an incident earlier in the season, and they were talking about how if it's a $50 million a year player, they're probably going to get a little bit more leeway than a guy that made the back end of the roster at the veterans minimum, which it's a bit of a meritocracy, and that's going to be part of it. There's still some things that would rise above, and you're still going to have to get rid of those guys. But that's going to be the case in college too, because now you have to placate those guys too, because they have a lot of power now. If you make an NIL deal with them and then they come to your team, they can go, well, I'm not really happy here. I'm not happy with my situation. You're not putting enough around me, and then they can bop into the transfer portal at the end of the next year and leave. So the power dynamics are different than at that point.
And really, when that power dynamic is such a fickle, not only is there a power dynamic within that team, but then certain people in certain levels of power are gone in a year or 2 years, and there's no substantive continuity where a coach stays forever and they're loyal to their players because they might leave for a higher paying job or a higher glory job. And players, I mean, there's guys that have transferred, 3, 4, 5 times already. I could not imagine what it would be like to talk about my alma mater, my college, where I went, where I had this amazing experience, and I'm dividing it among three or four different schools, much less 2 schools. I just don't. It's so weird to me.
It is strange. And then they're now graduating at a much older rate. It's like some of these guys that went into were the quarterbacks last year. You had guys like Bo Nix and Michael Penix that were older because they had Penix was partially because of the injuries, but they had transferred and then stayed. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, they're all prospects and they all have potential, but Bo Nix was older than some of the younger ascending quarterbacks already in the NFL. So that changes the math too when you're drafting a guy.
Oh yeah, you throw the factors in of, I think they got a little more lenient with allowing the medical red shirts and the hardship red shirts and things like that allowed guys to get an extra year of eligibility. The transfer rules got so blurry that whatever reason it's almost like free agency now. But then you add the COVID year, and you had guys who got that extra year because they didn't count the COVID year against eligibility. You had guys that I laugh. Matt Coughlin, a very good kicker at Michigan State, got 5 years to add on to his scoring total. So his record will probably never get broken because he started for 5 years. And I just don't see how anyone can ever beat that. And I think that's great for him. But you're seeing things that we just haven't seen. Like everything in the college football world is brand new to all of us. And it's some of us that are old school, some even more old school than me, that look at it and shake our heads, but yet we're still watching it, and we're probably going to keep watching it.
Well, it's football, so I mean, in general, it's like when the concussion stuff came through for the pros. That it's still football, so it still draws people in, and I mean, they're highly talented in the college football ranks. You didn't finish your career that long ago, and you also coached even more recently than that. But the amount that it's changed is immense since even your coaching career, which stopped just a couple years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it was already starting to change. We had, NIL was a brand new thing, and then we had, the guys, the transfer portal was starting to get a little loosey-goosey. The NIL stuff started coming in. You're having to recruit your own players to keep them from leaving. You're not just recruiting off of the database from Max Prep's, high school stats and seeing who's doing well and what positions and all that. Now you're looking at this ever-evolving portal of names that keeps showing up on these spreadsheets, and all of a sudden there's 2,000-3,000 kids on it, and you're like, I've got to figure out, did this guy actually play? Did this guy have film? Is this guy just spoiled and can't handle that they didn't make it their first year? And so many players, I think, have lost that developmental drive to be hungry, to grow, to get better. And I think when you lose that and you get that grass is greener, they're not treating me fair, I'm not getting a fair shake. Well, you're 18 years old. Most guys don't start at that age. And just because you're not, you can't just go somewhere else, because guess what? Now you got to start all over, and you're at the bottom of the totem pole because you didn't get any playing time here. And then you've got guys that, man, I was really relevant in high school, and I was getting recruited, and my name was in the papers all the time, and I was doing picking my hat press conference, and I got all this glory. And now I go here and I'm nobody again. Well, I'm seeing these other guys go in the portal, and guess what happens? Their name's in the news again. They're all over Twitter for a little bit. And they get that little dopamine, like, ooh, I think I want that feeling. I want that feeling of being back in the news again, even though I haven't done anything. And that's something that you also see. And I'm not saying that guys don't get unfair shakes in situations and there aren't real reasons. But overall, I'm not a fan of it, but yet I can promise you, just like you, we're going to keep watching it and just hope for the best, that something happens to kind of smooth it out a little bit.